up on that stuff. All righty. Chad Holley, Shield the Joyous is the name of this novel. It is from Bull City Books. That is a great name for a book publisher. Is that Durham, North Carolina? Yeah, Bull City Books. Shield the Joyous takes place in 1980s Mississippi in a neighborhood many of you would know like the back of your hand and know all your friends, and you know your friends' parents, and they invite you to spend the night over, and you get a crush on one of the girls, and you and your guys go out and get gross out in the woods and get dead possums dug up. And then, you know, on the second page, but it's a really fun novel. It'll bring back memories of your childhood. It's again called Shield the Joyous. Y'all welcome Chad Holley. Man, quite a book, as I said. It made me remember all those things. Sleepovers and having your parents be friends with your kid, your friends' parents and so forth. Yeah. Michael Haley is our narrator, and he is not exactly Huck Finn in his language. He's very adventurous like Huck, but he talks like a grown-up almost as far as his vocabulary. And then when he's around his friends, he talks like a 13-year-old.
Yeah,
Tell us about Michael.
Well, yeah, he's about 12 or 13. He's 7th grade. That's a big landmark for him. He's arrived. He's in junior high. It's a big deal. But yeah, he's precocious in terms of what interests him and where his imagination goes. You know, he wonders if people are real, and he's, you know, preoccupied with love and death and God and everything else. And but in other respects, he's just a normal kid running around playing football and, you know, wading around in the creek, catching crawdads and the whole deal. So yeah, it's kind of a mix. I wanted to, you know, let it all in.
Yeah, you sort of glossed over it there when you said it, but he wonders if people are real.
Yeah.
He's a very metaphysical, existential sort of...
He's a little philosophical sucker in a lot of ways. I just heard that such people are out there, so I tried to imitate one for 200 pages.
One of the questions I jotted down to ask you was, because invariably, like when you go back to your old grade school or your old neighborhood and you remember something so vividly and you get there and it's completely not what you remembered and you realize your memory is faulty at best. How do you obviously use your memory in the writing of this book in particular? I'm wondering, do you trust your memory, or you just say, I don't care, I'm going to make it up if I have to? No, I don't trust my memory
at all. And if I did before I started this book, I don't now. I mean, some of this clearly is you know, based on my own experiences as a boy growing up, and some of it is made up, you know, out of whole cloth. And I have a real hard time remembering which parts are which now. That's no joke, I really do. I've spent a lot of time in my imagination in both the parts that I was pretty sure happened sort of like that, and the parts that I know for a fact didn't happen, and I can't remember which are which now, so I don't know. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that makes me feel a lot better. But everybody had, so many of us had neighbors like these kids, and you run with them and you play with them, and your parents, as I said. And our Michael falls in love with, I guess it's kind of his best friend's sister, Wendy.
Yeah. And I wouldn't dispute that he falls in love with her, but I think one of the preoccupations he has, that the book has, is does he even know what love means? You know, is he, you know, he asked her to capital G go with him, so that's kind of a big step for him. But he doesn't really even know what to do from there. So. And
she when he asked her to go with him, capital G, she sends the answer back via one of her friends. She doesn't give him. It's almost like dealing with the North Koreans or something.
Yeah. And in more ways than one, because technically he doesn't ask her to go with him. He has a moment inspired by Arthur Fonzarelli where he goes up to her in the hallway and says, "Hey baby, go with me." And she just says, "Oh my gosh," and walks off. And but she sends, you know, word through her best friend at the end of the day And the answer is Wendy says okay.
And that just makes this day, of course.
Yeah, and he says, in fairness, there was no actual question pending, so, fair enough.
I love the detail that you give about Wendy, that she still has her braces, but she got her rubber bands off.
She was a looker, yeah.
So there's a whole sort of good subplot with Wendy. Now, in a neighborhood like this, a good southern neighborhood, there's got to be that sort of weirdo loner guy that sort of scares the kids.
That was me. No.
And here he is. In the book, we're not going to give anything away, but his name is Cletus. And can you tell us anything about Cletus? He's a very enigmatic figure. He's scary.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, he's, clearly inspired a little bit, at least in the background, sort of a Boo Radley kind of vibe.
Oh, totally.
But yeah, he's more than that, and there's I don't want to say too much, but there's a very interesting relationship, let's just say that, between the narrator, the young boy, and this Cletus in terms of just their relationship to who they are and their identities. So
yes.
I don't want to say too much more than that. I'll get confusing and give anything away. So.
No, you're right. And it needs to be a little something the reader can discover. We of course, we want you to read just a little bit from it, but I do want to ask you about the title, Shield the Joyous. Anybody here familiar wherever that might come from? I'll give you a hint, it comes from a prayer. That's why I didn't know it. Tell us where the title comes from, please, Chad.
Yeah, it's a phrase in a prayer in the Episcopal Book of Common Prayer. It's attributed to St. Augustine, so it's very old. And the prayer is in the book, and it's a bit of a plot device in a way, so I don't want to say too much about it, but it's, in terms of just in my own experience of writing the book, the prayer in early drafts, long ago, did not necessarily play such an important role, but in working on the book for, actually it's been about 19 years off and on working on this book.
Oh, wow.
And that prayer actually, probably because I was praying to just finish the book, but it became more and more important to me, and it became central to my conception of the whole book, and and it ended up giving the book its name. So, the phrase is pretty important.
From St. Augustine, and it just really struck me, please grant rest to the weary, bless the dying, soothe the suffering, pity the afflicted, shield the joyous. And I'm thinking, man, we do this every Thursday, and we're down here having so much fun. And we need protection because we're having so much fun. Somebody needs to shield us because we're not paying attention to anything.
Right, yeah.
We're having shield the joyous.
That's the way it's
really beautiful.
It is beautiful. I love it.
All right, now one more thing before we get you to read. Growing up, I had friends. In fact, my older brother could do that whistle thing with his hands. Can y'all do that? Can you do that?
All right, let's see if I can do it. I don't know. I used to could do it. I really could. So let's see.
You got it. No, you got it.
Hold on, I got this.
You got it.
There you go. You wouldn't believe how long I spent as a kid figuring out how to do that.
Man, I hope you do that at every book event you have because that is killer.
I need to work on it a little bit.
I believe, or we're going to hear a little bit about Richie Wiggin.
Yeah.
One of my favorite characters. You're going to love this. Again, y'all, sitting down and reading this book, it is joyous, although there's some very serious things, as you might think, sort of a family neighborhood drama, but really well written and just very evocative, and it'll put you in a good mood after reading it, and you will be joyous. Again, it is Shield the Joyous. Y'all please welcome again Chad Holley.
Thank you. Yeah, so Jim and I were talking about a character he really liked in the book named Richie Wiggins, and so I'll just read a little bit about Richie. Actually, it comes from near the end of the book. There's a ton of little boys and other characters in this book, and Richie's one that sort of passes through. Richie Wiggins was not unintelligent, but unnervingly opaque, the sort of child who appeared exceedingly pleased at odd moments and was perhaps too easily talked into playing the cumbersome, disrespected instruments in the bands. Richie would turn up in the neighborhood at random intervals, come from out in the county to live in town a while with his grandparents, a withdrawn old pubwooder and the wife of his youth, whose house sat back up in the woods, out of sight, down an unpaved tentacle off the development. At school, for whatever reason, I never saw much of Richie, but when he lived with his grandparents, we rode the same bus home, and on these rides he was indiscriminately sociable to the point of growing hoarse and damp-headed with sweat. One afternoon, the frustrated gladiatrix who drove our bus with a short-handled boat paddle within reach on the dash looked up in the rearview mirror and growled at Richie to turn around, sit down, and be quiet, please, sir. How about it? Richie obliged her just long enough to smile back at her in the mirror, pull a 3x5 index card from his shirt pocket, and hold it up for her to see. It had "No thank you" written on it. Richie then repocketed the card and sprang from his seat to join another conversation. To this day, it remains one of the deftest, most strangely satisfying things I have ever seen. But what came immediately to mind when I heard that as a 32-year-old man, Richie Wiggins had taken his life with a handgun was the afternoon he crashed a two-below football game in my front yard and demanded to be tackled. To clarify, we often played tackle, particularly when the game was roughhouse, that one-against-all affair in which one boy stands with his back to the others, tosses the ball over his head like a bridal bouquet, and whoever catches it takes off with everyone in pursuit until they grab him and pile on and ride him to the ground. After which he gets up, stands with his back to the others, tosses the ball over his head like a bridal bouquet, and so on until somebody cries or gets in a fight or can't stand up or see very well anymore. But when we craved the more sophisticated, elegant, collaborative aspects of the sport, when we wanted to huddle, run plays, throw passes, we typically chose up teams and went two below, more effetely known among some as two-hand touch below the waist. The device saved time and energy, and especially to the point, facilitated a certain shift of focus from cracking bones and bloody meat and into the cannon's mouth courage to skill, athleticism, outright pleasure, which evidently did not interest Richie. The first time he got his hands on the ball that afternoon, he stashed it under his arm like a load of stove wood, lowered his sweaty head, and started chasing his own teammates, the rest of us, everybody, all over the yard. We fled as before a disease, shouting over our shoulders at this stumpy-legged boy with the bull's fronds and strange motivations to stop, man, it was two below. When we could no longer deny that a new event was in progress, we took turns cutting across his path like rodeo clowns, until the artless and over-animated Sidney Sizemore, desperate for promotion in our eyes, was able to get an angle on Richie, swoop in from behind, and pop him below the waist. Got him, I got him, Sidney screamed, as some of us began to risk our best casual walk. But it did not work, and again we fled. Mercifully, at last, Richie wandered of his own inscrutable volition into an end zone, where he began to celebrate, humming and chuckling as he waltzed in graceful circles, hands on his leather partner's laced waist, impervious to our screaming that, nuh-uh, it was 2 below. Touchdown, Richie assured his dance partner and waltzed on. What were we to do? We quit the yard and left them to it. Sidney Sizemore said, who the devil invited that kid anyway? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Chad Holley, y'all. Chad Holley. Shield the Joyous from Bull City Books. And Chad will join us out front at the Square Books table, sign copies of Shield the Joyous, and visit with us some more. Some of you may know some of Chad's kinfolk, particularly his wife, Claire Holley, the great songwriter. She's been on the show a few times. I believe we've got her coming up. So we love Claire, and thank you, Chad. A very, very cool book.